Now, there's three things I'm hoping to touch on today as I have your time. The first of which being MFA, multi-factor authentication, and a little bit of conditional access. Second being site context or indexing for SharePoint. How can we confirm what Copilot is able to see in your environment? And then we'll also touch on how to enable or perhaps disable web access for M365 Copilot. But before we get into all of that, I think it's really important for all of us to be on the same page of how Copilot in M365 functions, where it lives, what it can touch. So I've borrowed this diagram from Microsoft's documentation, and a couple things I want to highlight here so that we're all on the same page. You can see that Copilot lives within the M365 service boundary. It's in the Microsoft cloud, and it has access to your data that is in your M365 tenant. That means anything within your emails or OneDrives, Teams data, SharePoint repositories, for example, that's all available to Copilot via the MS Graph. It also accesses the large language model, but an important distinction is that it's accessing the LLM, but your data is not leaving the service boundary. It's not going over the internet to anything. It is all still secure. It's all encrypted in transit. No need to worry about any of that. And then the other thing I need to mention here is that we can see your users and devices, as well as the apps on those devices. Those are all outside of that service boundary. So in order for your users to use Copilot, they need that internet access to your M365 environment. Now, as far as what your users can access or what Copilot on behalf of your users can access, those are actually the same thing. You can see in this diagram that we have the users and their applications accessing Copilot, and Copilot uses the same permissions that your user would have when it's going and searching for information to answer a prompt. So what this means is if you have your security in place in your tenant, if someone were to ask to see the payroll information of another user, if that's not something they'd be able to navigate to in SharePoint, then that's not something that Copilot is going to be able to witness. Therefore, won't be able to provide it to the user as a response to that prompt. What this means for security is obviously it's very important to make sure that users only have access to the information that they should have access to. But also, we need to shift our mentality a little bit where our security boundary that we're most concerned about is really this one right here. We want to ensure that our users are who they say they are, so that when that sign in and when that prompt comes into the M365 tenant, we can validate who they are so that we can limit the access to what that user should be accessing. And that is why the first thing we're going to jump into now is multi-factor authentication. So let me swap my share out here really quick. You can see here I am in the M365 admin tenant. If you've admined your tenant before, this should be very familiar to you. And the good thing here with MFA is that it is very easy to turn on for your users. From the admin center, you can just click on users, select your active users, and already here at the top, we have that multi-factor authentication badge. You can click on that to get into the Enter ID portal. And here you should see your users listed and the opportunity, if we were to select one of them, like myself, to just enable MFA. Users will be prompted when they sign in to set up MFA via the Microsoft defaults. And that really is a really quick baseline that you can have configured in your tenant to ensure that you have that level of security. You can see here in the text that Microsoft does recommend using conditional access to enforce MFA, which is something that you can do. And the world is really your oyster when it comes to conditional access. You can start leveraging factors like if a device is trusted, where a user is signing in from, what they're trying to sign into, what application they're using. All of those gates are things that you can choose to pull on when someone is trying to sign in. But this is security made simple. to keep it simple, select your users, as many as you can, and hit enable MFA, just to make sure that the people using Copilot in your environment are who they say they are. Now, jumping back into the admin tenant, the next thing we really want to keep in mind with security made simple is what data Copilot has access to. Now, if you remember the diagram, Copilot really only has access to data that is stored in the cloud, and cloud storage usually in M365 means SharePoint. So let's, for example, say that you have a few active sites in your environment. One of them has sensitive information that you don't want available for Copilot prompts, whether that be a project that your team is working on, sensitive financial information, personally identifiable information, any of that type of stuff. We just want to flat out omit it. And with security made simple, the easiest way to do that is to completely omit a site from Copilot. And the way we do that is by completely omitting it from the search. So let's load up one of our SharePoint sites here. We have some data in this. Let's pretend that it's sensitive, and we don't want it to show up in any Copilot prompt. The important distinction to remember here is that users will still have access to this information, and if they navigate through SharePoint, they'll still be able to get there and see it if they have the permission to do so, but it will be omitted from Copilot responses. So we're going to go into Site Information, we're going to go to View All Settings, and in the site settings under the search header, you can see search and offline availability is an option. So we're going to choose that. And it's really just this prompt here, allow this site to appear in search results. We can hit yes, or if this site has that information we were talking about, we hit no, hit OK. And now anything stored in that SharePoint site is not going to be available for indexing and is not going to be available to Copilot. If you want to get more granular with it and work on different document libraries within a site, that is an option as well. But again, this is security made simple. If you're just trying to test with Copilot and you want to hand it out to a few pilot users, but you have this repo of sensitive data, just completely remove it from the equation. The last thing I was hoping to talk to you all about would be web access. If you've used Copilot in Teams or some of the other applications, you might see a toggle at the top that says work or web. What does that necessarily mean? Now, presently, things are always changing with Copilot. Presently, work is your work environment, your M365 tenant, and web is the web, leveraging Bing search and looking through all of that information. But what if we want to allow our staff to use both together? Well, we can go to the Copilot Admin Center in the M365 Admin Center, jump over to settings, and you can see this option here near the bottom, web search for M365 Copilot. Now, setting this up is a little bit more technically demanding than the stuff we've been through so far, so I'm going to walk through it with you for enabling a cloud policy to enable web search. Now, Microsoft does make this very easy for us, so I hope you can follow along. You can see in our demo environment, we don't have any policies at the moment, so we're going to create the first one together, and we're going to call this M365 Copilot Web. Make sure you always include a description. There we go. Now for scope, if again, security made simple, you can get a little bit more granular with this if you want, but we're going to apply this to all users. And in the configure settings, we have a lot of templates from Microsoft, but if we filter it out by just typing in Copilot, you'll see it narrows it down very quickly. And here we have allow web search in Copilot. So of course we want to enable this configuration setting. And then within that, we have three options here. We have enabled, we have disabled, and then we have disabled in Copilot work mode, but enabled in web. So if we want to keep that distinction between the two, work is only for work and web is only for web, we can do that. But if we want users to be able to search internal information and contextualize that with web results, all while keeping your identity and your information secure within your tenant, enabled is the option we want. And if you've seen some of our other demos, this is what allows us to contextualize hiring information for candidates for a job posting, or pull information about a topic that we're discussing in a meeting so that we can be up to speed as the conversation is happening. Next up, we're just going to review and publish our policy, see it's applied to all users, hit create, and very shortly that will be live in our tenant. Of course, it may take a few moments for that to be rolled out to workstations and replicated to end user devices. But if you want the best of Copilot while keeping it secure, those are the 3 things I would recommend you action. Multi-factor authentication, manage your site contents to make sure what you want available is available to your users, and then come here and enable web search so that they can get the most out of it.